Resolution, Human Security and Global Governance. And it's great to have you here. We are trying to do a few sort of alumni connection events and also to showcase our awesome alumni. We have now, it seems kind of amazing, probably for both Deb and I, to say that we have about 56 or 57 doctoral alumni now. And so there's a proper network happening. Um, and Kelly and I have been batting around some ideas, and so we're going to try to get a little alumni networking going on and such now that we think we have a critical mass of all of your awesomeness. So thank you very much, Dr. Tim, Dr. Deb, Dr. Jean-Pierre, and Dr. Rebecca, for joining us. And I'm not going to do long introductions because I'll do a little moderating for 30 or 40 so minutes, and get you asking and talking, and then we'll open it up for questions for others to chime in. And the reason I'm not going to do introductions is because I thought I would start by having each of you tell us a little bit about you. So if you could just say a little bit for everyone about your current work, your affiliations and what you're doing, what you're working on, and the kinds of areas of work. And then say a little bit when you do that about your path there. So in terms of, some of you have been alumni for several years, and you've had a couple of different things several different things you have been working on and doing. Others are relatively new alumni. So again, what you're working on now and a little bit about your path, a couple, 2 or 3 minutes each, and we'll have a couple more rounds of questions and get going. Why don't I say, let's start with Deb. Get us started, and then Rebecca, I'll have you go next.
Hi, thank you so much, Stacy. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be here with you. I think you're starting with me. Is it because we're part of the first cohort? Um, I'm Deborah McPhee. I was part of the first cohort of students at the Global Governance and Human Security PhD way back in, I wouldn't call the year 20.
12, I think.
2012. And I currently work at the University of the West Indies in St. Augustine at the Institute for Gender Development Studies. I worked at the Institute for Gender prior to going to Boston, and I returned to the University of the West Indies because the University of the West Indies is the place that I needed to be. And my path here is a long one. Um, Somehow I think with regard to the program though, I think the people that guided us and took us here, so people like Professor Jane Parpart is important to my working getting where we sit here. So Professor Jane Parpart, Ronnie Lipton, all persons who really worked with us as the first cohort to make sense of the program, a very diverse group of people. And currently, my research is in gender and climate, women, gender, and gun violence, and gender-based violence with a special focus on child sexual abuse. Um, I'll pause here, and I think we'll get into the other panelist.
Thank you so much. Rebecca. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Sorry about that. Um, yeah, thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I think I'm probably the latest alum in this group. So it's exciting to see different generations of alumni from the GGHS program. So I am currently working as the Global Policy Coordinator for and this is a long name, but the W.E.B. Du Bois Southern Center for Studies in Public Policy at Clark Atlanta University. So I'm currently here in Atlanta. I'm very new. I started just last November. So, and in terms of what I work on, well, my dissertation broadly focuses on human rights, but in my dissertation, I looked narrowly at women's rights. But in this current job, what I look at are human rights and social injustice issues, particularly affecting Africans as well as people of African descent living outside of the US. So I take a global focus to the work that the center does. We have a domestic side and a global side, and my work is looking at Africans and people of African descent outside of the US. So broadly, that's what I am currently working on. I'm I recently am wrapping up a maternal mortality project and we'll be starting on something that has to do with race and migration as well. So a variety of things broadly in that space. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. JP, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having us. It's a bit strange to think in terms of generations of alum. Feels like just the other day that I was at UMass Boston. I'm currently at Claremont McKenna College as an assistant professor. Um, how did I get here? Through lots of work from lots of folks at UMass Boston. Maybe that's where I'll start, that I am where I am because I had incredible support from folks at UMass in the department. Um, Prior to coming here, whilst writing my dissertation, I was back in Jamaica at the University of the West Indies teaching, which I would not advise to any of you who are still working on your PhDs. You can avoid teaching full time while writing, do so. But anyways, I did that. And then I spent a year visiting at Wellesley College after. And then I applied for a tenure track job, and Stacy and Jeff and Peggy will tell you that they were my little team of, oh my gosh, when I was panicking or when I was trying to figure out how to navigate the job market or figuring out what on earth is a job talk. They were all incredibly helpful, including organizing practice job talks for me at UMass Boston and figuring out negotiating um, uh, an academic contract, all of that, they were incredibly helpful. I mean, I cannot get into how many hours they spent just helping me navigate this. And so that really is a major part of how I was able to land this job and figure out even my first couple of years here. I'm currently working on stuff related to my dissertation research. In fact, my dissertation research, I'm building on that for a book project which I need for tenure. So I'm in the middle of that right now and working on a couple other projects still related to migration security, which is what I was working on while at UMass Boston and building from there. I'll start with that and happy to follow up with other things as we go along.
Great. Tim, you're next.
Yes. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Hello, everyone. It's exciting to be back into the family because reconnecting with old members of the family and new ones, of course, whom we didn't get to meet. Nice to meet you finally. Rebecca, I've heard tons about you as a fellow compatriot in the program. Of course, it's nice to finally meet you. And of course, thanks to all of you wonderful people in the conflict resolution and global governance program, faculty, staff, students, of course, who have left and who are still there. You have brought me where I am now, and that is the Center for Peace and Security Research at the University of Professional Studies in Accra, here in Accra, in Ghana. I also occasionally teach at a newly established National College of Defense Studies. Actually, I was lucky to be invited to participate in reviewing the curriculum for that program to take off, and it has been running smoothly. It's actually had its second graduation, and they are going into the third round of admissions, and I'm delighted to announce that, of course, they still keep me in close contact, and they invite me to still facilitate various programs. But of course, in the Center for Peace and Security Research, where I am, permanently affiliated, of course, the experience that I have and the knowledge, the expertise, the guidance that I've had in the global governance and human security program, and indeed that I continue to get, of course, because I'm in constant touch with your good self, Stacy, and a number of you, of course, that has equipped me, strengthened me, prepared me really, and of course, may I say shout out to Ollie, because the opportunity to also have some instructional experience with the wonderful student teachers, I like to call them, of course, it was really great. Of course, transitioning from there to Babson College, again, through the support, assistance, and guidance, of course, from you all, and indeed Stacey specifically. I mean, all of that, in addition to the knowledge I have gathered in the training, has been instrumental in making me do what I do, which from my students, I think that is creditable. I'd like to say that every year at graduation or at the end of every year, we have new experts in human security. It has been like the new thing, of course, because it hasn't, for some time, not been a subject in discussion, really. The security circles, of course, both at the national security establishment and indeed the academic institutions. So, of course, it's delightful to note that the concept is picking up through this very important program that I'm lucky to be affiliated with. And of course, the college that is specifically actually geared toward military officers. So actually these days I'm learning to salute, and to salute properly also. So yeah, it's been a wonderful experience. And of course, I think I also had to say a little bit about my research or dissertation, something like that. Of course, I pretty much followed the life and processes, if I would say, of the Minamata Convention on Mercury. Of course, looking specifically at its role in addressing mercury pollution and artisanal mining, which is extensive in Ghana. So the idea really was to trace governance processes leading, of course, across the continent, of course, even at a global level, as far as I could do it. And then within Africa and in Ghana and local mining communities, somehow to see how prepared the communities and indeed the country was to implement this very important convention in addressing mercury pollution in artisanal mining. Of course, several stories emerged from it, and I'm sure we can get into that as we go along, but I will leave it at this for now. But it's been a delight, and I'm happy to be back virtually, of course, with all of you. Thank you.
Great. Thought I'd ask a couple of follow-up questions. JP and Tim, say a little bit about your students. You've now both been acquiring quite a bit of teaching experience. So say a little bit about the students, your experience, how the teaching is going, challenges, opportunities, whatever you want. But I just thought I'd ask you a little bit about your students. JP, why don't you start with us?
Sure. Uh, well, interestingly, I was just talking about teaching with my faculty mentor here yesterday. Um, and I referenced the graduate teaching program at UMass Boston. I cannot recommend that program enough because, um, you know, nothing says that getting a PhD means that you become automatically a good professor. And so it helps to at least have some exposure to what good or good enough pedagogy might look like. I will say that in the last two contexts that I've taught, it's been very different than teaching at um, a large public university or a large university. Because Wellesley, Liberal Arts College, Claremont McKenna, Liberal Arts College, I have smaller classes, um, which means that I have to be a lot more intentional about teaching. I don't lecture. It's more so seminars, it's discussions. I have students who are eager to engage in discussions. And actually, perhaps one of the most frequent comments that I get on my reviews, because yes, students do that. It's a part of the we are evaluated by the students as well. Is that they want more discussion, right? They want more space to talk. They really are interested in that. And that makes for a wonderful teaching and learning experience, I find, because it also fits with what I think teaching should be, that I don't feel like I walk into the room as the expert or the only expert. I learn from my students through the assignments that they're doing. It gives me insights into things that I might also want to research, I might also want to work on. I'm getting cool research questions just from the discussions that we're having.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd say that that is certainly my experience with the students. It's oftentimes, I mean, if you're thinking career-wise, liberal arts colleges are framed as these teaching intensive spaces where professors teach more than they focus on scholarship. I mean, the two that I've been exposed to are certainly not that. The tenure standards here are quite similar to tenure standards at a research university. And the demands in terms of scholarship are therefore rigorous, just like anywhere else. Um, but I'll say that it's also rewarding because some of these spaces are also well resourced. I'm affiliated with a research institute here for a small college that has an IR research institute that's really well resourced. That's rare. Um, and there's lots of support for teaching, lots of support for research. So I'd say that there's that. And what else might I say about the students? The fears about all the other things that are floating around now in terms of ChatGPT and so on are other things that we can talk about. But I think generally the students are really motivated, really engaged, and really curious, especially with the current international climate, well, national and international climate that we're facing. Tim?
Great. Tim? Tim, you're muted.
Yeah, in much, it's similar ways, of course, but with slight variations with what JP, I mean, experience, of course, in my case, is pretty much discussion. I think I'm doing a lot more learning actually than teaching, for the most part, because the caliber of, the kind of students that I deal with for the most part are mid-career and sometimes even senior government officials, mostly in the security and intelligence institutions. But of course, there are also, and, ministries like, say, the Foreign Affairs Ministry, stuff like that. And of course, various other professionals from other institutions, private sector, indeed, of course, and even sometimes traditional leaders, So actually, my classrooms are, they are supposed to be intimidating to me, but but of course, I came with a lot of preparation, indeed, from all of you. So, our discussions. Most students come to the program, and the program I teach, and is a graduate program. It's a master's in peace and international security management and intelligence management. And so most students come to class with specific objectives, that are supposed to gear toward enhancing their work. Most of them are promoted, so to speak, by their offices, by the agencies, the ministries, to come and learn specific stuff. And so the kinds of questions, that I deal with in class, for the most part, are out of textbook. We have to engage on real issues. And of course, this is where I find how the training in global governance and human security comes in handy, because of course, we have been giving the guidance and to be able to fit in research, teaching, policy, practice. And so somehow all of that comes into play in our discussions in class. And of course, the lenses through human security, in fact, traditional security actors who mostly are in the class are able to pause and realize how much of the idea of security they in fact need to learn. And so, but for the most part, the experiential part of the teaching, I learn a lot, from a group of students that I deal with, and especially when I go to the military college, the defense college. Of course, students are selected from the level of colonel upward, and these are people who are coming for training, ready to take up serious national assignments. Of course, some of them who have gone through the program have become, some very influential people, in the security sector in the country. So the experience has been very rewarding, I have to say, with respect to the kinds of practical exposure that I get, that enhances, the learning of concepts and theories that I have done for the most part. And indeed, I have through that even ventured into teaching some other courses that, intelligence, for instance, which is, completely new. I'm beginning to have to learn a lot more of it, in the practical context, but of course also reading around it so as to be able to engage in these discussions. What is interesting also, it may be a little bit of the challenge, is that for my program, it is the expertise is still very in short supply. There are not many people who have the kind of expertise required to run the program. So of course, until very recently, I was about the only, or I think there were two of us who were permanent subject area experts. Everyone else was adjunct or occasional or, guest lectures and stuff like that. So we also have had to do a lot of supervision of thesis writing, and that takes a toll, especially within the context where, there's resource challenge and a lot of logistical issues. So that has been the part that somehow is a little bit sometimes draining. And of course, for me, having to relearn to be a truly Ghanaian, and especially an Accra person, because of course, it's been a while away and a lot has changed. It's crazy. So, but overall, I find a haven in the classroom. When I get lost in the city, I run to class and I feel very comfortable because, of course, I have a bunch of security people making sure I'm safe. So I'm enjoying that. Yeah, really.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That's awesome. Deb, you have been so productive in writing. You have a new book coming out. You're getting research and writing done. I also happen to know that you're administering and running a lot of things. And so I just thought I'd ask you a little bit about, as we say, keeping all the plates in the air when you have programs to run and students around and getting the writing done and doing some research. So I'd love for you to say a little bit about that because you've been very successful at those competing priorities for several years now.
Stacey, I'm not sure about keeping all the plates in the air, but there are some plates that fall, but it's a forgiving space. Sometimes I have to say hello to Courtney. Hi, Courtney. Um, the honestly, the process of writing the dissertation at home. So I returned to the UWI to write, and there was a discipline that I developed with another colleague of mine in engineering who was a mother of two. I was a mother of one. And we would meet at 4:30 every day to write.
Mm.
And so we would write until about 5:30 because we returned. She was coming home from MIT to write. I was coming home from UMass Boston to write. We were trying to do full-time jobs, as JP spoke about, writing, research, and what's it not. And we carved out that time. So I still, to some extent, carve out that time. I don't get it done every day, but it's something that I say to students, just carve out that time.
Yeah.
I must be honest. By the time I was carving out that time, I took no pay leave, gave up the job for a while to finish the thesis. So, so I have to confess, I went into no pay to finish the thesis. So, but that time is important, that 4:30 to 5:30 time. That keeps me connected to whatever I'm writing. However, though, it's important for for the work that I do. So the post that I hold, the outreach and research post within the institute, is a post that straddles research, teaching, programming. It's a particular post that some of the universities in the global south recognize the need for us to be very intimately connected to our responsibilities around development. And much of that has to do with the ways in which we understand and curate the voices of our people. So you hear me say that I'm doing work around gender and climate. And for for us to ensure that the NDCs that we connect to at the level of Paris becomes owned by our local people. There's a lot of work in there that people like myself need to go into different communities and work through the ways in which groups have historically connected to processes of climate resilience. So that is what I do. That is what I enjoy most about my work because that then becomes the classroom a lot of times for my students, whether they're visiting students that need to be connected to civil society, whether or not you're forging connections between my local community group and my students in the classroom, which who are generally graduate students. So there's that aspect of the work, and it is a space where you grow the work. However, I will say this to you. I will say this to you though. Um, the ways in which increasingly it is important for us in the Caribbean who are borrowing words from one of our leaders who live on the front line of climate change to really see that ownership of the ways in which we interface with climate change. So that in itself, um, it is about spending time with narratives. It is about unpacking those narratives. Um, and sometimes it is about also making space to challenge the ways in which you may want to transfer one to the other, but it doesn't work in the space, the global north, global south, different spaces, and that's it. And the book, Stacey asked me about the book spends time capturing all these diverse stories. So I have stories from civil society actors, I have stories from indigenous groups, the book spends time doing that, largely because I will say to you, um, what one of the things that Professor Jane Parpart, challenged me to do, actually two things she challenged me to. She always said to me, Deb, it's more complicated than that. I'll sit with Jane and I'll be like, Jane, this thing not making sense. I think X, Y, Z. And Jane would be like, no, it's more complicated than that. Who are the actors? And she'll sit and she'll speak with me for long periods around the complications of the work that we do in policy. And she was the one who said to me, listen to me. You can't spend your time negotiating between the gaps between implementation and formulation of policy. You have to work through complex issues around the politics of policy making. And so the book spends time doing just that. A more expansive lens around diverse actors, yes, but we spent a lot of time working on the gaps, but it was Jane who said, there's a whole lot of politics going on here. And she's talking about big P politics and small P politics. And so I honestly, in the early days of the book, when Jane talked to me, she used to. And in all honesty, I must confess that now I harass Craig. So I send Craig emails and I say, Craig, you wouldn't talk to please, because there's that guidance. See, this program allows for that, and that accessibility is something. JP spoke to it, but that accessibility is something that I really do appreciate because it allows it allows me to think through. So that's why I have a conversation with Craig in the book. There's an entire interview with Craig because I feel as though in terms of those connections between global governance and human security, I wanted to capture Craig's voice. So I did an interview with him. And I'm grateful. The program is that kind of space where you could spend time unpacking years after you have left. I know that if I email Craig, he will respond. Give him some time. So think that
That is
out.
great. Thank you so much. And Craig Murphy, I know, still keeps up with lots of the students, and in fact, takes time to talk to some of our current students when they want that. Rebecca, as our newest alum on the panel, I thought I would ask you a little bit about those pesky issues of arriving at a new place in a big new institution with new duties and new people and the whole thing. I just wanted to ask you a little bit about getting launched in a new institution with a new kind of work, and of course centered around your human rights interests and passions, but just say a little bit about getting up and running in a big new a different kind of American institution in a different part of the country.
Well, first to just revisit something, I think I missed one of the questions from the very first question you asked about our journeys. So just briefly touch on that before I answer this question, because I guess they'll feed into each other. So yeah, I started the program in 2020, COVID year, peak COVID season. So I mean, Stacy struggled with a lot of emails from us, not sure whether we were going or coming, what was happening. Will we still have graduate assistantships? And I think for me, the thing that really solidified the fact that I had made a right decision with the program was Stacy was leading was the chair at the time, but Stacy and the university as a whole, and how they bent over backwards to ensure that we were still enrolled in the program remotely. And those of us who had graduate assistantships, even though we couldn't work that first semester, we could still be funded. That for me was, I would say it was a very big thing, because at the same time, I knew about 2 or 3 people who had equally been offered admission to graduate programs across the US. And they had to defer. Some had to defer. They never were able to go back because for one reason or the other, those institutions couldn't make it work for them. So for me, I would say that set the tone and the pace for how the journey would be for me and for so many others. We found a lot of, well, let me speak for myself. I have found a lot of support in the faculty, the staff, colleagues, both in my current cohort and even in previous cohorts. The support has been phenomenal. I've been introduced to, for example, Crystal introduced me to the Mercatus Center, and I'm still with the Mercatus Center, winning 3 fellowships with them, and now going to be one of their scholar participants. Stacy, Peggy, I can stop talking about Peggy. Peggy is I call her my day one girl. We are still in touch. Everyone has been so supportive along my job search process. Those who did interviews with me did that. Stacy wasn't one of them. Those who wrote recommendation letters, references, standing up, the list goes on and on. So the point is that you don't just get the support when you're in the program, you get the support long after you're done with the program. And that is a big thing, especially when you know the experiences others have had. So to the question you asked, I moved from Boston in early November, and it was a bit of a tricky time leading up to that time, because as an immigrant, of course, I had to go through the H-1B process, and a lot was happening around that time, if you know the climate that we're in. So for me, up until I basically got the go-ahead 2 weeks before I left. So if you can picture, having to relocate across states and, trying to figure out housing and everything else in between. But I would say that the institution where I am now, very supportive. I mean, the wait time, they had to wait for things to go through and they still held on, phenomenal. So the transition was, I would say it was smooth in a lot of ways, all things considered. I made it to Atlanta safely. I've settled in quite nicely, both in terms of the city and the work, the institution. It's different because this is an HBCU. I had never interacted with HBCUs, and since I came to the US in 2016. So this has, been a new experience. First of all, you don't see a lot of white people. Coming from Boston to Atlanta is it's a bit of a cultural shock. It feels like I'm back in Ghana. So that is very interesting. And it's a different culture. So for example, I'm getting used to not referring to myself by my first name and having to say Dr. Yamu, which is a lot for me because over here it's a thing. Mm-hmm. And you have to be comfortable with with being called that and also referring to others at that. And it's so difficult to navigate because you don't want to upset someone, but some people don't mind it, some mind it, and it's tricky navigating it. But it's been a beautiful journey so far. I've had a lot of support here in terms of the center where I work and the department as a whole. It's based within the political science department here. So that has been great. It's a small team of 4 for the center, so small but mighty. And what else can I say? I don't know if I'm capturing everything, but yeah, I think for now that sums it up. It's been an adventure so far, living in Atlanta and sort of wrapping my head around the differences between Boston and Atlanta. For one, I missed the blizzard, so yay. I moved at the right time. Today, for example, it's like between the 16 to 20 degrees. The weather is interesting. I think with Boston, you know what to expect. You know you're going to be cold about 10 months of the year, so you don't need to check the weather app. But over here, you need to check because you can go between freezing one day and spring the next day and summer the third day. So you don't know what you're getting. You can have 4 seasons in a week. So that's quite interesting. So yeah.
Good. The recently passed Jesse Jackson would have liked your response about the different Americas you are learning about, because there are lots of them. He always liked to point out. That's been great. Thank you so much. Since it's let's see. Let's combine. I had two other questions, but I want to combine them a little bit. And just give you one more round, and then we'll go out for questions. Say a little bit more about your current research, what you've been working on. Deb, you did some of that, which is great. But say a little bit about your kind of research paths and what you're working on. And then because it's Black History Month and we have the four of you wonderful people on this panel, I would also love to hear if you have things you say. It's a challenging time, at least in this country, but not only, on diversity, equity, inclusion, on things global, on things about equity and justice. There are counter narratives in every direction. So I'm happy for you to sort of say a little bit about your research and a little bit about how you think about and navigate our current various kinds of national and transnational politics. Let's see. Why don't we have Deb give us a quick start, and then we'll go to JP. She's laughing,
You're
but
good. I'm smiling because I have a research assistant here with me who's trying hard not to get on camera. But anyway, so, Stacey, you asked about how.
yeah, a little bit more about your research if you want to say anything more than you did before, and then a little bit about your experience in the current moment with diversity, equity, inclusion, gender inequality, justice issues that you work on. So
This is this moment is a very I wouldn't call it interesting. I would more call it it's a space for opportunity. For those of us, and this is my reading of it, for those of us in the global south to very carefully curate our voice. And that is the challenge of this moment for us. When there's a way in which when imperialism in its multiple forms presents itself, it says to you, there's one story and there's one way of saying that story. And the challenge for us as people, the global south, and we people of color, if you understand the Caribbean, how small we are. One of the questions that always comes in this moment is our possibility and our potential to be autonomous and to speak with our voice. Yeah? Our right to voice is always, and our right to rule ourselves is always a question that comes in this moment. But in that is an entire language around erasing, whether it's color, whether it's origin, whether it's sex, whether it's sexual orientation. There's a way in which that language is a language of erasure. And so for me in this moment, and I say to you, I spend time around issues of climate and gender, women, gun violence. What we're really doing is constantly challenging ourselves to make sense of the differences within. And how do we ensure that when the people we work with, our partners, even our university colleagues, when we speak with a strong sense of who we are. We
Mm.
speak clearly understanding where we are, what is the space that we are occupying, or the spaces that we are occupying, I should say. And that to me is the challenge of the university in the global south in this moment, because there's no topic that happens at the global level that we can't begin to make sense to own. And in order for us to be able to show up at the global, because we have to show up, we show up, we show up. Sometimes we show up, and in this moment, some of us showing up, subscribing to all kinds of ideologies. But the fact is, the work of the university remains how do we show up with a voice that is true to who we are? And I think that is the challenge of this month. And the essence of that is making space for multiple stories. And I think that for me, the work of gender is first and foremost ensuring that people who are not historically seen need to be seen. So I think it just is a space where it allows you to make more room, make more space, ask yourself who you're not seeing. So that's a challenge I throw out to my students a lot. Who you're not seeing, your public policy making, who you're not seeing. Because when we sit around the table, everybody who looks like you and you're comfortable with can't be the only people on your table. So to me, that is the
Mm.
opportunity of the moment, the challenge of who I'm not seeing and who I'm missing. I hope that
Thank
answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Um, JP.
Or perhaps I'll start off with an anecdote, and hopefully Stacey will not mind. As I was preparing for this job and preparing for the interview, um, I remember Stacey said to a group of us uh, that race might be an issue that comes up, and I was saying, well, I mean, I grew up outside of the U.S. Um, my identity is not only tied to race, and that's not sort of how I walk through the world. But Stacey said, well, actually, when you go to this interview, you care about race. As it turns out, it came up in the conversation. It did. But one of the things that I recall was when I came to the campus visit and I met with students, um, they mentioned representation as being important to them. Um, And it really wasn't something that I had thought about in that great detail. When I was at Wellesley College as well, there was a group of, there was a Caribbean Students Association, and they invited a group of us there. Again, I didn't necessarily think of myself in terms of faculty of color and so on, but I went and I became more aware of how some students felt. They didn't have to be blacks. They could be, just students who are minority for whatever reason, whether it's socioeconomic concerns or otherwise. Um, and that I realized that the students also need to see some of that represented in their faculty, whether it is because of our own identities or because we demonstrate through our teaching and through our mentorship that we care about these things, that we see them how they are. And I think that is something that has come up in the way that I approach my courses. I mean, I teach courses that are perhaps either very fascinating to teach now, depending on how you think of it, or very difficult to teach. In the fall, I taught a seminar on migration and security. I was teaching the intro course to international politics, and this semester I'm teaching international law, which maybe no longer exists, and I'm teaching international organizations and global governance, which maybe also no longer really is a thing. We're all students of global governance at a point when it seems to be in flux. But what I do more of is, well, the migration and security course lends itself really readily to that, but I do incorporate sections on race and identity and gender and so on. In my international law class, I am having the students think more intentionally about the origins of international law and the extent to which even these well-intentioned norms are shaped by some kinds of assumptions about hierarchy in the world. And similarly in international organizations class, right, we think about how the institutions can be used instrumentally by particular states to perpetuate these divisions, global north, global south, and so on, and what some of the language that we use really means. So I think I've definitely realized here that students will like just reach out to me, come to my office hours and so on, just wanting to talk. They will self-select into my courses because because either the issues that I am talking about or how I'm approaching these issues, or just also because for them it's refreshing to see that, I mean, they could see themselves in some way in some of the professors around. So I would say that that is sort of how I think about it now. It's still very challenging to navigate because of the prevailing context now, and the kind of targeting of academia. Another quick anecdote. I mean, I published a short piece recently in which I wouldn't say I was critical of. I was explaining the law behind why U.S. operations in the Caribbean were wrong, to put it bluntly. And I had to think twice about actually publishing this. And I mean, I have a follow-up piece that I've actually not gone through with publishing because I gave another talk. I had the piece on it. A colleague suggested that I did so, and it had to do with, the subsequent invasion of Venezuela. And you think twice about publishing it because, I'm still on the tenure track. And I'm still also on a visa. And so those are things that you really have to think about. And lastly, how that overlaps with my research. My research, when I started my dissertation, I didn't think it was going to be about race. And then it became really squirrely about questions of race and how our understandings of race and identity are contextual and contingent and ever changing. So much so that the context that I researched, the Dominican Republic, where you have so many Afro descendants, you could still have very racialized politics there. And so that is those are some of the things that I'm still thinking about in my research.
Thank you so much. Part of that reminds me of Rebecca's comment about the culture at Clark Atlanta, because I think it is quite common at historically Black colleges to have this culture of using the titles because it is so important in those contexts, and historically was rare that people with doctor and professor in front of their names are also men and women of color. So you get, these sorts of traditions even at the institutional and very local level. These traditions emerge very differently, and they mean different things. Tim and Rebecca, you're welcome to comment or not comment on that, and then we'll go out to a few questions. Rebecca, did I see you moving toward the mute button? There you go.
Yes, I mean, I hope my video isn't weird with this whole tech issue on my phone. But so I think for me, I don't really have a choice. The work that I do is SMAC DEI work. I am looking at people of African descent and Africans. And of course, within that, I look at the intersectionality of gender and other conditions as well, class, education, and the list goes on. So I have to confront it head on, whether I like it or not. But, I think I was nodding a lot as Jean-Pierre was talking, because I have had to think twice about certain publications. I've actually had to turn one down because I looked at the theme and what I was supposed to write about, and I was like, by the time this thing goes out, I'll have someone knocking on my door, finding a way to kick me out of this country. But that is, I think for me, it's an honest discussion I had with my executive director. I told him, this is the climate we're in. I know I'm an immigrant. I know my visas, and I know the invisible rules that I must follow, right? Because technically you haven't been told you can do something. However, there are consequences when you do that thing. So it's just about how I frame the work that I do and how, I pick and choose my cases, and there's a lot about the framing. So for example, one of the first projects that I'm working on, like I said, I started just 3 months ago, but I'm looking at racial disparities and maternal mortality, right? Looking at Black women in the US and people of African descent in Brazil. And because this is an issue that, I mean, when you look at the data, it's quite glaring. You can't say it doesn't exist, right? Because these are two different countries, very two different contexts. But the one thing that they're having in common is that in both cases, Black women are disproportionately dying. Why? There is a why. And so that is what my project seeks to do. There are a few more others in the pipeline looking at race and migration as it pertains to asylum seeking and a few others, but I can't run away from it. I'm doing the work, but of course, I'm being smart about how I do it and, picking and choosing my battles, because I think there are two ways people approach this. Some feel you have to be all out there and, stand for something, or you fall, but self-preservation is key. And you have to find a way to do your work, to do that work, but also looking out for yourself. Because unfortunately, at least for now, we live in a system that is not looking out for you. And when something happens to you, no matter how much your institution supports you, there's only so much they can do, because what you will find is that when it comes to immigration, the institution's hand is tied. They'll tell you it's a federal issue, and that's how they get you. So you have to sit down and make that decision for yourself, especially if you're operating within the US, and ask yourself deep and hard questions about how you want to proceed. It's not to say you can't do your work. Like I said, I'm doing the DEI work, and within the institution, I haven't faced any pushback. In fact, we are pushing to do more of these kinds of things, but it is it going out there, how it reflects on the institution, because yes, you are in an HBCU and all that, but they also have to look out for themselves and make sure that you're not, so to speak, rocking the boat too much. So you have to find a balance. And I think for me, I've constantly been able to find that balance in the work that I do. So the work that I want to do isn't compromised. The research and policy work that I want to do isn't compromised, but I am also not compromised at the end of the day. So I would say it's a difficult climate, and to anyone listening, students who want to do that work, I will say you shouldn't say because of the climate, you're not going to do it. You just have to find a way to do it. Like Jean-Pierre is saying, like I am saying, you have to find a wise way to, go around it and still do it, but also be selective. Because if you get into trouble, really, no one is coming to save you. That's the reality of the problem. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I will say that this panel would have had a fifth participant, but one of our alums who is at a public institution in a particularly hostile US state basically said that their reading of the policy and their colleagues is that because I asked to participate in a Black History Month framed thing, that they would be running afoul of the institutional advice and or policy they were given. So another illustration that one has to make wise decisions, and one finds a way to do important work around some obstacles, but also in the context of being wise. So this is and informed. I think this is the other thing: being informed and reflective about what one's challenges are. My personal experience was that as some of my colleagues have heard, I spent my whole first part of my career as an assistant professor. I was convinced that the only reason anyone in the president's office knew me is because I was the gay political scientist. So, like environmental scholars and other people would come to campus and no invitation would come from the provost's office to dinner. but every time someone even remotely political and gay, lesbian, or transgender would turn up on campus, I was at the president's house for dinner. I was like, they don't have any idea what I do here. Like, I'm just the gay political scientist. So those were, I laugh about it now. I was not nearly as amused in those days.
You're so much more, Stacy. So much
Thank you
more. We
very
can't
much.
even capture it. We
Thank
appreciate
you very much.
And your scholarship is fantastic.
But it is,
Their loss.
I'm identifying with that. Rebecca also conjured up memories of me in a mask and a visor for in a small classroom for the 2020-2021 year. So my goodness, I'm also being called up old back to the days. Let me say, let's ask a couple of questions. Tim, if you want to chime in or address, we'll work you in. But let's ask our attendees if you've got any questions. And I see some of the people by name whom on here, so I know that there are some of you who definitely have questions to ask. So you can raise your hand or put something in the chat if you'd rather I read it, whatever you want.
Well, someone is waiting to raise their hand. Isn't it hilarious that Crystal Gail O'Neill has managed to get herself on the Zoom 4 times?
Yes.
With 2 different photos.
Yes.
Crystal Gail, how do you do that?
I was the one who shared the link, so people just didn't rename themselves.
Oh.
You know, still out here doing the work,
You
even after graduation.
You cloned yourself, Crystal Gail, successfully.
Thank you.
Dominic, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you so much, Prof, for bringing these amazing seniors into the program to kind of inspire us and share their stories. I also have that kind of uncomfortable feeling calling them by their first name, so I prefer to also call them by doctors because from where I come from, it's hard for me to, for example, call you Stacy instead of Professor Stacy. So yeah, thank you, colleagues, for this amazing talk. And also to know from Dr. Timothy that UPSA is lacking in expertise when it comes to security and peace and stuff like that. It means that there's a way for me if I should come down to Ghana. And then that also really brings my question. So you came to the US and so many expectations and experiences you had, and you have to go back to Ghana. How did you navigate that kind of environment, which I believe was not really friendly because now you are not really part of Ghana that much and you are not part of the US that much in between that kind of space? How did you navigate that? Thank you.
Great question.
Do I respond or we take a few?
Go ahead, Tim. Give us a quick response.
Well, but you will have to stop me if I don't stop because it's so much to say. I'm not sure even where to start. But of course, the fact that I even have to relearn to also call people, and in fact, we say doc. Like it's such a prize. You cannot afford not to say that. That has landed me in some trouble, really, because of course, and imagine, Stacy, that I think I almost somehow mastered how to say Stacy and Jeff and Courtney and, call people by their first names, and then, of course, transition to having to return to have to say, Dr. Dad, Professor Dad, and it has been challenging, really, I have to say. But on a more practical and more, if I would say more serious in the professional context, is the fact that there is so much that I have had to relearn. I think one of the things actually even is that my only serious experience with a professional environment in Ghana before leaving was as a national service person at the University of Ghana. Of course, also during, after high school. So very much is what my experience with teaching and the larger professional space was. There was very little contact I have with what really pertains to, the university environment. And so having lived in the US for all of these years and having had the entirety of my experience in the university environment, within the US educational system. I mean, there has been a lot really that it's challenging, I have to say, just simply that, for example, even communication, and I understand that there are logistical issues, there are logistical challenges, and that is really one of the reasons for which even official communication takes place on WhatsApp, that I'm still struggling with that. I spend my first class with every group of students, teaching them why and how to email, I mean, why that should be official, of course, and again, I get into trouble with some colleagues and school authorities, because then that means that I am telling on them or something of that nature, because that is what happens. Everyone, I mean, and I'll tell you a brief story. And like I said, stop me, So coming back, right before coming back, there was this documentary about issues with, professors and students and, underhanded behaviors, grades for sex. I think, this is what it was called. I always say it's a badly done documentary. But of course, raised some issues that are really key to education and the professional environment in general. And then I arrive, and the first, I mean, to be invited to go to my class, because of course I had to find it. I don't know where the room, the blocks are. It's a whole, that is another story anyway. But I get a text message from someone that I don't know, and someone I haven't given my number to, someone, of course, and coming from the US. I mean, phone numbers is not something you pick on the street. You give numbers to people you have established serious confidence with. There's a reason to share your phone number with somebody. Otherwise, a bunch of things could happen. And then I get a message from a student, supposedly, I didn't know at this time, but of course, eventually I got to realize this is a student, and a female student at that now. The question in my mind was, how would it be a problem? I mean, how would it not be a problem if we can exchange, or if students can just have your cell phone number and send you a text or call you at any time? Or why should it be a problem if that is the norm? So, I mean, I'm, still struggling to understand that, to grasp that. Of course, I understand the logistical issue that somehow makes that legitimate, but that is one thing. But, the other thing, of course, is, like I indicated earlier, the need, the demand for people like you and me. When I left Ghana, there were maybe only 3 universities, maybe 4 at most. Now, honestly, I have lost count. I don't know how many universities there are in Ghana, and there aren't many people to fill in all the programs that have to be run. And indeed, even I think I shared my schedule sometime with Stacy. It was crazy, that there was a time I had on 2 occasions. That was a mistake anyway, but that also speaks to the demand. On 2 occasions, I had to be in 2 classes at the same time. I mean, that speaks to the level of demand for people like you and me. I mean, of course, programs we run regular, we run evening, we run weekend. So I had, for instance, say if I had a class in, say geography, for instance, I have a geography regular, geography evening, geography weekend. So that is, running that program, and the numbers are huge. So, I mean, in a nutshell, really, part of the challenge has been how to really appreciate, the way the educational system runs. Of course, because of these background challenges, the numbers of people who need to be educated, who need to go through school, and the lack of, adequate resources, human resources, especially, and logistical issues, that we have to work magic, I think, and of course, I doff my hat to the people who run the institutions, But of course, there are certain things that we are dealing with that, make it a little bit, in fact, a lot challenging. So, I mean, we could talk a lot more about various other things, even navigating Accra. I have to say that is a personal one, but there's a whole lot that one has to really learn. There's a lot of readjustment actually that I didn't anticipate, and a whole bunch of things. Yeah. But of course,
that's great. I'm sorry. That's
great.
great. I wanted to point out to some of the students who are on that also both Dr. Tim and Dr. Deb have done a great job at both maintaining and expanding their transnational networks when they went home. And so I think you will see in both of them, in the writing they do and the work they do, in various kinds in the teaching they do, that that you don't give up these connections when you if you go back home or leave the US for wherever else. That these are networks that can be really important. They can be important personally as well as professionally. And it's one of the reasons that we want to inspire a bit more alumni connections. I have been scribbling 2 or 3. Our speakers will probably hear from me again because I'm going to be connecting them to a couple of different students who I know and a couple of other alumni who I know that they should probably spend more time chatting with. So, other hands up, other questions? Crystal, I find it hard to believe that you do not have a question or a comment.
Did y'all just call my name?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, Stacey, what you want me to say?
Oh, I'm sorry. I said I find it hard to believe you didn't have a question or a comment for our panelists to something that you would like to hear from them about.
No, because everybody else I talk to except Timothy, but everybody else I talk to on a regular. And Deb, did you tell them that you tell them about a little project that's coming up?
No,
go ahead.
Crystal. I think I want Crystal to talk about this project.
No, it's your project, but you can pop it off. And I talk to JP and them all the time.
All the time.
All the time. But I'm proud of my Caribbean massive though. Hey, what's up?
Is it okay, Stacey?
Yes, please.
Just a little bit. Okay, the Institute for Gender and Development Studies, we have an online journal called the Caribbean Review of Gender Studies. And Crystal, Gail O'Neill, and another colleague from FIU, Professor Susan Swingle, has agreed to co-edit with me a special issue of the Journal of the Caribbean Review of Gender Studies. So we're going to reach out to you all. It's all about the insecurities of the moment. I heard JP talk about what you don't want to write and what you want to write. And the journal, I assure you, will share the call with you all. But it's a pleasure to have Crystal Gale on the project with us. Crystal came and spent a lot of productive time with us in Trinidad when she was doing her research. And we'll put it out there. Caribbean Review of Gender Studies. And it's an open access journal, so you can use it in your teaching colleagues if you wish.
That is fantastic. I love it. And details to be distributed. Thank you so much. One of my favorite things about my now several years of being GPD for the for graduate program director for the program or chair of the department is the occasional happy text I get when some GGHSers are together in somebody's office or in some restaurant someplace. So indeed, I remember I got a lovely picture of Crystal and Deb. I think the day that they finally met in person, and was with a wave that made me very happy about our ongoing network. All right. One last call for any follow-ups. I'll just say this to close us up. Thank you to our 4 panelists. You guys, awesome. So you guys, there's my Midwestern accent. You guys are awesome. Now you know I'm from the center of the country. You're and we will continue to try to do some alumni connecting. We'll be emailing you all and trying to set up, a couple little networking events. Maybe we'll organize a sort of a gender group or, what, but I basically want, to give you guys some opportunity to self-organize and make some connections so that we can continue your awesomeness as alumni, but also then connect you a little bit to our current students for whom your careers and accomplishments are inspirational. And it reminds them that they do not have to be extremely poor and overwhelmed with 1,000 pages of reading a week in the center of Boston for too long. They can get on. They can get on to other phases in life. So let me just do a quick applause. Thank you, Kelly, so much for all of the work. Thank you, Lee. Jason doesn't do on Friday, but thanks him too for our staff, and Jeff and Courtney and the faculty who joined. So it's great to see you all. We'll keep being in touch.